there from Jen Psaki, and she said it was a friendly call. So do we assume the spat is over?
I don't think it's quite that easy, Delano. I think this was the first step in a rebuilding exercise by the US president. I think Joe Biden's been a bit embarrassed by what has happened and probably understood that it was not the right decision to go ahead and pull this contract from France without some kind of discussions between allies. That was one of the complaints put forward by Emmanuel Macron, who really has banged on the table over this. So it was necessary to have this friendly phone call. And France was expecting the United States to propose a lot of measures to try to compensate the fact that France thought it had really been short-circuited and ignored. So here they are. More open consultations are needed. That was something that President Biden agreed on. Macron and Biden are to meet for talks, probably on the sidelines of the G20 meeting in Rome next month at the end of October. The French ambassador, as you were saying earlier, is going to return to Washington next week. That's a major step forward. But there's also some pledges by the United States to increase their ability to recognize French importance in the Indo-Pacific region, where France is the major contributor of European naval fleets. Also, President Biden giving some leeway towards France's desire to have a stronger European defense mechanism. That is something that France is certainly going to push for when it takes over the rotating presidency of the EU at the beginning of January next year. President Biden saying that this could be compatible with NATO, which is something that has always been an argument in the past against that, the creation of that strategic mechanism. And finally, the US has pledged to increase its help in the West, in the Sahel region, to France in France's fight against terrorism, arguing that the fight against Al-Qaeda is not just a French fight, it's also a US fight, because Al-Qaeda can also launch attacks against the United States. So there will be an increase in that. So pretty positive, a pretty positive buzz coming out of these talks between President Biden and President Macron.
Okay, so that is the Franco-American relationship, which is healing there for now. What about the Franco-Australian relationship and the Franco-British one?
Okay, so some progress with the United States. Let's say they're not back completely to normal, but they're getting there. As far as Australia is concerned, well, there's no progress there at all. The Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has said that he's tried to arrange a phone call with the French President, Emmanuel Macron, over the past week, but hasn't managed to do that. He said he would wait patiently for Emmanuel Macron to pick up the phone.
Getting the call
that
treatment.
hasn't happened, so no return of the ambassador for the time being. And Britain's Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has come out with a very vociferous statement about relations between France and its allies, and that's not going to help things either.
I just think it's time for some of our dearest friends around the world to, prenez un grip about all this, and donnez-moi un break, because this is fundamentally a great step forward for global security.
So if you look at the front page of today's British daily, the Daily Mail, they are calling this le bust-up. But of course, this is a pretty typical Boris Johnson behaviour. Boris Johnson's keen to emphasise the fact that Britain's no longer a member of the European Union, and he wants this trade deal with the United States, so any reason to castigate France and criticise them is good for his image as far as the British public is concerned. Now, what effect is this going to have on Emmanuel Macron and his popularity back here in France? Well, if you look at the past, when Jacques Chirac stood up to the then President George W. Bush in 2003 against the invasion of Iraq, that boosted his opinion poll ratings here in France. I think the French like it when they see a strong-willed leader who is an ally, but not an ally who's complacent with the United States. We will go with the US, but when they do something we don't like, we will say it. So I think he will be appreciative of having stood up to President Biden. I think there's a lot of anger here in France about that contract that was taken away from France without any consultations taking place. But if you look at the opinion polls themselves, Emmanuel Macron is struggling a little bit with more people against what he's doing than those in favour, especially those over 65. But looking forward to next year's presidential elections in April, there is more hope for President Macron. He is leading in the polls on about 23%, 5 points ahead of his closest rival, who is Marine Le Pen from the far-right National Rally. So we'll see whether what has happened in the last few days is going to boost that.